I'm Roy Lee Lindsay with the North Carolina Pork Council, and I want everyone to remember, bacon makes everything better.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the David Glenn Show, now seen and heard exclusively here as part of the North Carolina Sports Network. Please find more of our audio, video, and articles at our website, ncsportsnetwork.com. A quick thank you as we move on very quickly to today's guest, Darren Vaught, one of the best young sports broadcasters in America, especially on all things baseball, including today's topic, the College World Series, which this year includes 4 members of the Atlantic Coast Conference, 4 members of the Southeastern Conference, and 0 members of the other 28 Division I conferences in college baseball combined. That ACC baseball quartet, of course, includes 2 teams from our backyard, the University of North Carolina and NC State University. This is only the second time in the history of our state that we have sent 2 teams to the College World Series in the same year. It happened in 2013 with the same 2 schools, and that year, the Tar Heels and the Wolfpack actually played each other twice in Omaha, with each winning 1 head-to-head matchup, but neither advancing to the championship round. This time, it's Coach Scott Forbes and the Tar Heels on one side of the 8-team bracket in Omaha, and it's once again the legendary Coach Elliott Avent and the Wolfpack on the opposite side of the bracket. Because of that bracket setup, the only way UNC and NC State can go head-to-head this time is if they both advance to the championship round, which is a best-of-3 series between the survivors of the 2 4-team mini brackets out in Omaha. Anyway, the quick thank you to everyone watching and listening out there today is because we've added about 9,000 YouTube subscribers just in the last 3 months. And once you get a little beyond 10,000 subscribers, you actually join the top 2% of all YouTube channels in the world in terms of subscribers. So this YouTube channel, remember, it's not even 1 year old yet. So the idea that we recently joined or are about to join the top 2% of all YouTube channels in the world is just an amazing thing, and we're incredibly thankful to you for that. Okay, with the College World Series in mind, we welcome back as today's special guest someone who about 2 months ago on this show, as well as his own shows, told us that it was going to be a special year for college baseball in North Carolina and a special year for college baseball in the ACC. As usual, the young man was right. Darren Vaught is one of the great young play-by-play voices of many sports here across North Carolina and beyond. He's the voice of USA Baseball, a voice of D1 Baseball, the co-host of ACC Baseball, etc., the podcast, a lifelong baseball guy, a former and longtime producer, of course, of the David Glenn Show, and someone who at this point is a beloved member of the extended Glenn family. Darren Vaught, welcome back to the David Glenn Show, my friend. How are you?
I am over the moon. You know, I get to cross something off of my bucket list in a mere couple of days and go to Omaha for the College World Series. D1 is sending me, so not only am I going as a boyish college baseball fan the way I would have 10, 20 years ago, I'm going to go as credentialed media and cover it. It's pretty surreal. So yeah, man, I'm on cloud 9.
Well, thanks for joining us, especially at this exciting time. You know how it works in many sports. Heck, you and I were side by side covering various ACC basketball tournaments held in a variety of cities. We've either seen or attended a variety of Final Fours. Again, those things move around. The College World Series has been in Omaha since 1950. It's one of these cool things like the Masters in golf, where, you know, it's Augusta National every single year in that particular case. It's Omaha in the case of the College World Series. With you headed there, I know you've talked to these coaches, talked to these players, and talked to a lot of former coaches and players. How do you describe to the more casual college baseball fan how Omaha, Nebraska makes this event its own and what these Tar Heel and Wolfpack and other baseball players have in store for them for as long as their team can survive out in Omaha.
Yeah, I'll try to answer that. I certainly can't wait to be able to answer it with firsthand experience. This is it's first of all, it's a city that, it's funny you made the Masters and Augusta comparison, because it's very similar, right? What you hear from the community of Omaha is that this event, in some cases, is what their business, what their community rallies around for the course of a calendar year. And I mean, it's slang somewhat to say, but I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, in Omaha, the College World Series feeds families. Like it is, there are people who work in the sport of college baseball year round. Their livelihood is planning and convening for the College World Series on the men's side. It's a great venue. Charles Schwab Field is a bigger venue than even the LSUs of the college baseball world have played in front of. Like 27,000 are going to be there, and they pack it out, right? Because this is the event of the season in college baseball. You bring together 8 fan bases. They all convene. There are local businesses who do sort of celebratory annual traditions, like you might be familiar with the Jello Shot Challenge at one local establishment, where they keep a tally for fans of all 8 teams there, and the proceeds go to charity. And of course, it's for bragging rights for a fan base by the end of the week. Again, I can't wait to be able to tell you from firsthand experience, but Omaha is the College World Series and vice versa. I mean, they go hand in hand, like Augusta and the Masters.
You have celebrated on our platform and yours SEC baseball all season long and ACC baseball all season long. You probably know every tidbit I could come up with, among many others, but I'll remind our audience, there have been years in the past when a single conference got 4 teams out of the 8 to the College World Series in a single year, right? This is not the first time that's happened, but it is the first time that we've had 2 leagues do it in the same year. So you're headed to Omaha, and half the teams are from the SEC and half the teams are from the ACC, and nobody else is represented around all of those 28 other leagues in college baseball. I want to start with the SEC, and of course, we'll dive into the Tar Heels and the Wolfpack in a bit. But when I was young, Darren, and you hear that phrase occasionally, I know LSU was winning national championships in the early 90s, et cetera, but I don't remember the SEC being this mega superpower every single year the way, for those who don't know, SEC members have won 5 of the last 6 national championships in college baseball and 6 of the last 9. Again, it was not always that way in my childhood. What has happened in the Southeastern Conference? Is it big money and good geography, or is it more complicated than that?
I think those are definitely pieces of it. So just to further the context that you just laid out, let's remember the ACC is far and away the second best conference in all of college baseball. The ACC has only had 2 teams ever win the national championship. Wake Forest decades ago, and Virginia not quite a decade ago at this point. And that's the second best by a long shot. So the SEC continually wins, and it's the ecosystem for college baseball. It's not dissimilar to other sports, right? Similar to the way that college football became very much the SEC's game in a lot of ways in recent years. The geography certainly plays a factor. When you talk about pipelines for high school prospects in the sport of baseball, Florida comes up a lot. Georgia comes up a lot. Yes, we've got great players here in North Carolina too, but Texas comes up a lot. And guess what? That's the SEC footprint now. So that expansion played a part in this as well, so that players in Texas who might have dreamt of becoming Texas Longhorns someday at least in the relatively near future, they're going to watch SEC games because maybe they're young Texas fans. Well, they're going to get exposed to LSU. They're going to get exposed to the Florida Gators. They're going to get exposed to the Georgia Bulldogs, and something might switch off in their head to where they say, you know what, I think I would prefer that program. The Kentucky Wildcats, it goes on. So yeah, the expansion's a big part of it. That part of the country in particular really rallies around its college teams and baseball in particular, and big money. It's a good synopsis, right? I think those would be the three biggest pieces of the puzzle.
The four SEC teams, of course, are number 1 seed Tennessee, number 2 seed Kentucky, number 3 seed Texas A&M, and the unseeded but still dangerous Florida Gators. The 4 ACC teams are number 4 UNC, number 8 seed Florida State, number 10 seed NC State, and number 12 seed Virginia. Now, Darren, I've been watching ACC baseball fairly closely for almost 4 decades now. As you mentioned, it's been a weird combination where the league almost always has national contenders, but in 70-plus years has only that Wake Forest win in 1955 and that Virginia College World Series title of 2015. Have you ever come up with a good theory or even heard a good theory for why the ACC, which sends a ton of players to the major leagues, has plenty of college All-Americans, and you get to call these games on your variety of platforms? Is there any rational reason that the ACC has only 2 national championships in baseball when the other sports the ACC is good in, they typically have, a dozen or more national titles?
It's a good question. I don't know that I have a good theory other than for various periods, other conferences were typically better. And of late, I think it's fair to say that the ACC, when given the probabilities of a field of 64, can manage at least a couple to possibly 4, like this year, teams into the final 8 in the bracket without having as good of a shot to win the whole thing as SEC teams do. I do think that this year we've got as good a chance as we've ever had, and we being the ACC. In that regard, it doesn't help that 3 of those 4 ACC teams are on the same side of the bracket as the number 1 overall seed, but this feels different. There's an element of bragging rights being on the line between conferences for this College World Series. It's why I think it was important for it to not be 5 SEC and 3 ACC. It was important to have the even split because this feels representative of maybe a new era in college baseball where the ACC is right there with the likes of the SEC. Some of the top players in the ACC were transfers from SEC schools. That was previously unheard of. I don't know that I have a good theory other than maybe the Atlantic Coast Conference just wasn't quite ready for that yet.
I'm always impressed when teams can win away from home. And in the case of this year's College World Series, 6 of the 8 teams did not have to leave their home field to get there. So I wonder if you put any weight at all on NC State, which went to Georgia and beat the Bulldogs in Athens on their path to Omaha, and a team I remember you talking about, it feels like 6 months ago. The Florida Gators are the only team in Omaha that were on the road for their regional. They had to knock off Oklahoma State and others in that opening weekend. And then, of course, they went to Clemson and knocked out the Clemson Tigers on their home field. Remind us of how the Gators are here, because we have had national champions from the bottom half of the bracket, meaning somebody was a 3 seed or a 4 seed in the opening regional weekend. You never see national champions from the bottom half of the bracket of the men's basketball tournament or the women's basketball tournament, among others. It does happen in baseball. So what can you tell us about the underdog, in air quotes, Gators, but also a Wolfpack team that knocked out one of the best players in college baseball and a pretty good SEC opponent in Georgia after previously taking care of the South Carolina Gamecocks as part of that Raleigh regional?
Yeah, I don't. I think the placement of teams that perform well on the road in the College World Series is going to be it's going to be more productive to talk about perhaps what type of team they are and how that plays to the ballpark. I mentioned Charles Schwab Field. It plays much larger. You can pitch to contact in a lot of cases that you cannot in typical college on-campus ballparks like Boshemer Stadium at North Carolina or the Couch at Wake Forest, which is known as a sandbox, and hitters get home runs there pretty easily. I'll start with Florida. This is not a surprise. They might be a 3 seed from their regional. It's not a surprise. They were number 2 in the preseason rankings behind Wake Forest, who is no longer playing this season. They have the most dynamic player in all of college baseball in Jack Caglione. He is a left-handed pitcher who gets mid to high 90s with his fastball, and he's also maybe the best power hitter the college game has to offer. He's an absolute specimen of a person. I've shaken his hand in person because he was on the collegiate national team a season ago. Big guy. It is overwhelming how large of a human he is, and he hits balls hard. And again, it's not quite Charlie Condon of Georgia, like you were mentioning, just as a pure hitter, but Condon and Caglione both with one swing of the bat can totally change the complexion of a game. Not to mention, it's the Florida Gators. They were number 2 in the preseason. What do we base those rankings on? Largely talent. They've got dudes. That's not been an issue. They got off to a little bit of a slow start with their season, and that's easy to do in an SEC where every weekend you are truly being tested as well as any team in the country. They played midweeks against Florida State and got whacked pretty hard early in the season. So you mentioned North Carolina, NC State as a potential College World Series final. We also have FSU, Florida as a potential final lingering out there. That could be fun. Florida's really good, and they've got a guy named Brandon Neely who is sort of their leverage pitcher. He was their Friday starter for much of the year. They moved him into the bullpen because they just felt that was the best situation for them. He threw a lot of pitches to get them through the Super Regional. If they need a reliever in the 3rd inning or the 8th inning or the 10th or 11th inning, he's probably going to be the first one that comes out because he can give you some length out of an appearance if he needs to. But he's also the type that is very much a closer in the way that he throws, his mentality, his stuff. He can put the finishing touch on a game. And that's just to name a couple of the stars that Florida has to prime you on them. At NC State, man, I told Elliott Avent early this season when they weren't performing as well that I really, really, really liked his group. And I still think it's true that if you were to pull up their stats, there's not a player on the team that is performing numbers-wise as well as they are a good player, if that makes sense. Eli Serrano III, their center fielder, is not even hitting 300 yet this year, but he's had a huge impact on their postseason. It's a team that, again, they've been in this spot before in recent vintage. Sam Highfill, in fact, who is their ace in now the year 2024, was their go-to guy as a starting pitcher in 2021. He set many career highs this season where the previous high he set in the year 2021. He's been around a while. NC State also brought in some transfers, a guy named Garrett Pennington from Wichita State. This is like a rugged veteran of college baseball. He's performed really well. He's a great hitter. And then Alec Makarevich, who made his way from East Carolina. AMAC is literally the most experienced college baseball player in the country, DG. He has the most games played of any active player in college baseball, and that matters this time of year. I think they've got this really nice mesh of experience, youth. We haven't even mentioned Jacob Cozart, who's their catcher and high draft prospect at that position. They've just got a really good mix, and they've found the back end of the bullpen. Jacob Duden is a true freshman. Derek Smith is a true freshman. they have sort of split closer duties as this team has found itself. And those guys are all stuff. It is some of the most electric pitching you'll find in the country between those two. It's this nice little thunder and lightning dynamic that they've got in the backside of the bullpen. Fun fact on both of those, Duden's his walkout music is Triple H's old entrance music from WWE. And they called Derek Smith D-Rock. His walkout music is The Rock's entrance music. So
nice.
There's a little bit of Attitude Era is what that's referred to in world wrestling and entertainment. They've got some attitude to them. It's the Attitude Era of the NC State bullpen. They're so fun, man. I have not officially made a bracket and selected winners. I think I would put Florida versus NC State on that side over Kentucky and Texas A&M, which would be so much fun.
If you are anywhere near Wilmington, North Carolina, and looking for a little live music, a cold beer, a tangy slushy, a fun crowd, or just a taste of the good life at the beach, Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach is the place for you. Located on North Lumina Avenue, just 1 block from the sand and waves of the Atlantic Ocean, Jimmy's features a full bar with nightly beer and drink specials, and it hosts musical performers almost every day of the year. One more fun fact, Jimmy's annual Children's Bike Drive, which started in 2017, now distributes more than 1,000 bicycles and helmets per year to young people in the Wilmington area and beyond. Jimmy's Bar, your home away from home on Lumina Avenue in Wrightsville Beach. Darren Vaught is joining us on the David Glenn Show. Check out his stuff with D1 Baseball. Look for him out in Omaha if you're there or headed there yourself. And, of course, check out his podcast, ACC Baseball, etc. Since we just talked a lot about the Wolfpack, we got to talk a lot about the Tar Heels. This is a school, Darren, that has been to the College World Series double-digit times. For those who don't know, Florida State famously, in our neighborhood, ECU kind of infamously is the school that has made the NCAA baseball championship the most times without ever getting to the College World Series. Obviously, that was extended this year. UNC is on the short list. Florida State is number 1, 20-plus trips to the College World Series without ever winning the College World Series. But Carolina's in the top 2 or 3. And most of those under Mike Fox, the legendary coach who retired about 4 years ago. It's Scott Forbes now. Obviously, none of these guys carry the weight of any of that stuff, whether it's superstition or otherwise. But what makes these Tar Heels special and what will have to go right for this group to be the first one ever to come back from Omaha with the trophy?
What makes them special is a lot of what I think we talked about when I joined you earlier in the season. The lineup is dynamic. They can score basically any way that you can conjure up based on what you know about the game of baseball. They hit home runs at a record-setting pace. They can bunt runners over. They're great base runners collectively, basically 1 through 9. They've got a couple of bigger guys who are not known as runners but are capable. And they're not going to be stealing bases anytime soon, but they can get from first to third on a single, etc. They've got a star who is rising to the occasion. Vance Honeycutt is playing better baseball than anybody in the country right now. Their star center fielder who is the emblem of that offense in that he can do anything you want him to succeed. I mean, in the Super Regional against West Virginia, he hit a walk-off in Game 1, a leadoff home run on the first pitch of the game in Game 2.
Yeah.
And then he struts up to the plate his second time up against West Virginia in that Game 2, lays down a bunt and runs it out for a single, scoots from first to third on a short bloop hit, and then comes across on another single. I mean, they won the game 2-1. He basically generated both runs himself in his first 2 plate appearances. I mean, that's the type of game-changing talent that Vance Honeycutt has. He also made an incredible play out in center field to tag up a runner on a throw in turn 2. There's a metric used. It's pretty self-explanatory by its name, defensive runs saved. It is meant to determine the number of runs you take off of the board for the offense as an individual defender. Vance Honeycutt led the country by a mile in that metric. In addition to the more noticeable stuff, the home runs, the base running, the general swagger that is so appealing about him, the confidence that he's playing with right now. So I think there's a lot to be said for when your stars show up for the moment. To this point, Vance Honeycutt has done that for North Carolina. And who's to say he's not going to continue to do that through a run in Omaha? So that's on the offensive side. The pitching, this is interesting. Scott Forbes, since taking over for Mike Fox, this has sort of been the bugaboo for North Carolina, the pitching staff. And Forbes is a former pitching coach for these North Carolina teams himself. This year, they lost their Friday ace before the season even started, a couple of weeks. Jake Knapp, injury, done for the year. Because of the way that they constructed this roster, that forced two true freshmen to get bumped up into their Friday and Saturday spots. Folger Boaz was the Friday guy at that point. Jason DeCaro was the Saturday guy at that point. Well, then Boaz gets hurt, not quite midway through the year, a little over midway through the year, actually. And their second Friday starter is gone. DeCaro bumped up. He started the season just hoping to make the rotation as a 17-year-old true freshman. He's their ace now.
Yeah.
For a team that at the time of this transition was still undefeated at home and first place in the ACC. A guy who transferred from Elon named Shea Sprague bumps up into the Saturday role. Experienced guy, a lot of pitchability, as you the former pitcher, I know, are well aware of what that means. He's not going to blow you away with his stuff, but he hits his spots. He pitches to weak contact and lets the defense work. And then Aiden Houck is another guy who did not expect to have a huge role this season, I don't believe, who's been slotted in the Sunday spot and thrown pretty well for them. So you've got Jason DeCaro, again, 17 years old earlier in the season. He's only been 18 for about a month or so. The youngest player in all of Division I college baseball, and that's your ace. Okay. At some point, you sort of expected it to turn the other way, right? Okay, this can't last forever. The pitching staff can't continue to sustain this. Then you look at the bullpen. Matthew Mateus, Greenville, North Carolina native, and Dalton Pence, who's really come on as maybe the best reliever in college baseball down the stretch here. Two of the most oft-used relievers in the country. And they've not let up, right? I think the concern with them was you get them so many outings and it's going to start to drop off the productivity. The starters, there's a freshman wall for a reason. People refer to it all the time. Maybe DeCaro's not going to be this great for the entirety of the year. Well, he and Sprague, the de facto Friday and Saturday guys, second team All-ACC. It hasn't dropped off yet. So North Carolina does it in a number of ways. They do everything well, at the very least well. They do a lot of things incredibly well. And you're sort of getting a version of this team where the lineup's great, which we expected it to be, and the pitching has met them, and turns out it's a top 15 ERA in the country, and it's got, some playability when it comes to postseason baseball, with DeCaro leading the way and Dalton Pence on the back end.
Whether you are moving locally, nationally, or even internationally, and whether you're a residential or commercial customer, please consider our friends at XL Moving and Storage, an award-winning Allied Van Lines agent with offices in Greensboro and Raleigh. Thanks to their 25 years of experience helping North Carolinians all across the state with their moving and storage needs, XL has become the trusted hometown North Carolina moving services company. Our good friends Jim Dorsett and Jody Hatley, along with their hardworking staff, offer customized, tailored relocation and storage solutions to the people of North Carolina and beyond. Visit them online today at xlms.com. That's EXCELMS.com. I want to get you out of here with this, and you can add anything beyond this particular question that comes to mind that you view as a key as fans are watching over these next, week and a half, basically. As a former pitcher, when I observe baseball, I've always thought that in a regional format, double elimination, you can play so many games in a relatively short number of days that you can essentially run out of arms. Even if you're a good pitching staff, you can just run out of dudes. Certainly in a super regional setting, 3 games at most in 3 days, it's a little easier to manage, but you could still, if you don't love your third starter, you could stress your staff again. I've always been fascinated, and I know they've tweaked the format in Omaha, but basically, whether you're a fan of the Tar Heels or the Wolfpack or any of these other teams, just to remind everybody, whether you win or lose your first game, you get a day off. And then you play on day 3. And then I think you get another day off. And you play, if you're still alive, you play day 5. I have no idea. You know these. I know the ACC rosters. I don't really know the SEC rosters very well. But if I were a team, if I were a coach or manager that loved my fielding and my hitting, and I was just a little worried about my pitching depth, I'd actually like this College World Series format, because I'm thinking of bringing my number 1 starter back for game 3 if I make it that far. I'm thinking of never using my third starter unless I absolutely have to, as a long reliever or something like that. And if I love my top 3 or 4 guys in the bullpen, I'm using them situationally, whether, as you said, it's the 3rd inning or the 8th inning, the traditional way. Anyway, that's a long way of asking, do you see the format helping anybody or hurting anybody or complicating anybody's road to a possible title?
I think it helps basically everybody. It's interesting. The double elimination regional format without these days off obviously makes it infinitely more difficult to play out of a loser's bracket. We saw that with East Carolina. We saw that with Wake Forest. It doesn't matter how good your pitching is. And Wake Forest saved Chase Burns, one of the best pitchers in the country, for that second game and still couldn't climb their way out. The days off helps more so for a bullpen, I think, because when you have, it has become more and more in vogue to have, Duke, before they were eliminated, had a guy named Charlie Bielenson, who was another one of those oft-used guys.
First
Swiss
team
Army
knife. Yeah.
Swiss Army knife out of the bullpen, regarded by many as the best closer in the country in college baseball this year. But he didn't get that title only by pitching the 9th inning. He would toss 3 through 5 sometimes as well if he needed to. So I mentioned Brandon Neely for Florida. That's kind of the way they use him. A lot of teams will save that role for their best pitcher in a lot of ways, and we've seen Dalton Pence do that for North Carolina in some cases, come in less conventional situations as the high leverage guy, as the closer guy. So the day off helps those guys, because it means if you're North Carolina, Dalton Pence, if your first few games, you win one, you lose one, you got to play for a shot at the College World Series finale, he's definitely able to pitch in all 3 games. Not to mention, if Jason DeCaro gives you 6 strong innings in your first start as your ace, he's probably available out of the bullpen in that game 3 as well. So it favors a lot of these teams, especially in that when we look at teams at the beginning of the season and you think, okay, this team is built for a postseason run, you look to see if they've got 2 legit starting pitchers. Florida State would have had that if Cam Leiter had not gotten hurt. They've got, to me, the best starting pitcher left in Jamie Arnold. So he versus Tennessee's lineup is going to be a fascinating first matchup on night 1. Outside of that, I mean, there aren't teams that have 2 for sure ace pitchers the way that Florida State projected to have, the way that Wake Forest at season's beginning projected to have, with Chase Burns and Josh Hartle, who, fell off a little bit this season and did not pitch to that ace capability that he has. So I think it favors everybody in a way. It should make it really interesting, and it favors everybody. Let me put it this way, DG. It opens the door for everybody. I think when I say it favors everybody, you think, okay, well, the top teams are going to win, right? It's going to be chalk, just like the super regionals were or whatever. I don't think that's how this is going to play out. I think it opens the door for just about anybody, because no one is going to get so overly taxed in the pitching department that the other team overpowers them in any way. I mean, I think it sets up really well. It's a great format. We're going to have some awesome matchups. There's some specific ones that I can talk about. Virginia, North Carolina as the very first game of the proceedings is going to be so much fun. I can't wait. I love this field. I really do.
To me, it also puts an emphasis on doing the little things right, avoiding mental mistakes, and really managerial impact. I mean, I get the sense that you don't see an insane difference from team 1 to team 8. If there's not an insane difference, well, then clutch hitting and clutch pitching and managerial moves and pushing the right buttons, that stuff really jumps out as important. It actually makes it more fun because it sounds like it could be unpredictable. Again, I've seen the 4 ACC teams way more than I've seen the SEC teams. So, and the SEC teams are the first, second, and third seeds. So I don't want to discount anybody, but
this is
it's a stacked field. There's only a handful of times in the history of this tournament that the top 4 seeds all made the College World Series, and this is one of those years. So whatever we're going to get, it's going to be fun.
And I'll say there aren't many years where I look at the field that goes to Omaha, and I think I would not at all be surprised if any of the 8 win the whole thing. That's the case. Like that's what we're dealing with here. Any of the 8 could win the whole thing, and it wouldn't be the least bit surprising. So that's and some of those winning on the margins decisions are going to loom large in this. And there's some teams who do really well at that. I think NC State, at least at the end of the regular season, they led the country in walk-off wins. North Carolina all season has just sort of pushed the right buttons. If they put a hit and run on, it seems to work. If they, need a fly ball to drive in a run on a sacrifice, it seems to work. They lay down a bunt, it seems to work. They're in that category. And Kentucky's kind of the same way as a team that we haven't really talked about, and they're the number 2 overall seed.
So what you're telling me is it's going to be the Heels and the Wolfpack in the championship round, best of 3, with the national title.
Can you imagine?
It's the same year the Wolfpack beats Carolina at the ACC championship game and beats Duke in the Elite 8. The same year they do that in basketball, they'll get a shot at the Heels for the whole kit and caboodle out in Omaha. That would be fun. His name is Darren Vaught. Check out his stuff with D1 Baseball and his very popular podcast, ACC Baseball, etc. He is the co-host of that one. He is a longtime friend of our program and a former producer of the David Glenn Show. Great to see you, my friend. Best wishes in Omaha. I'm glad we got to play golf together recently. It's always a lot of fun to catch up with you. But I have fun on this maiden voyage out there. I've been there, but it's been quite a while. So I'm going to live vicariously through you this time.
Yeah, you should. And I'll tell you all about it when I get back. And again, it'll be a firsthand account for the first time ever. So I'm excited to show up in Omaha and be a first time, long time.
Thanks, my friend. Everybody out there, enjoy the baseball. I say the same thing to Darren. Enjoy the baseball as he goes out there in person. And thank you all, as always, for joining us today on the David Glenn Show, heard exclusively and seen exclusively as part of the North Carolina Sports Network. When you get a chance, please check out our website as well at ncsportsnetwork.com. We'll see you next time.